Well, welcome to another roundtable discussion here at the virtual concourse, the Concours Virtual. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Richard Charlesworth, and even if you haven't bumped into me at a classic event, you may have heard me over the PA as the Master of Ceremonies for the Quail, a motorsports gathering. I'm also curator and joint presenter of the Concours of Elegance at Hampton Court Palace and a presenter of the London Concours. I'm also an established concourse judge and reasonably well known for my association with Bentley, having worked for the company since 1974, most recently as the Director of Royal and VIP Relations, head of the Heritage Collection, and as brand ambassador until I retired in 2017. Now, Jamie Lincoln Kitman is a New York lawyer and rock band manager and a contributing editor to R&T, The Road Rat, and Airmail. Jamie is a winner of the National Magazine Award and was a long-time columnist for Car, Top Gear, and Automobile, as well as a contributor to the New York Times, The Guardian, The Nation, Vanity Fair, and others. He's the president of Octane Film Cars, which in partnership with Haggerty has supplied cars for film and TV, including The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, The Irishman, and The Americans. Peter Larson has co-authored a number of books with Ben Erickson on French cars and coach builders, and is now working on Joseph Fogoni, Le Grand Couturier de la Carrosserie Automobile. Peter's worked for many years in the entertainment industry, but is now involved in writing and judging at a number of international concours, including the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, where he also serves on the selection committee, as well as Chantilly Art and Elegance Richard Mille in France, the 21 Gun Salute Concours d'Elegance in India, Salon Privé in England, and the Concours d'Elegance Suisse in Switzerland. In addition, Peter Larson is a member of ICJAG, the International Chief Judge Advisory Group. And Dave Kinney is a lifelong automobile enthusiast who's been able to blend his passion for all types and ages of cars into his vocation. The owner of US Appraisal, an automotive valuation firm, Dave is an accredited senior appraiser with the American Society of Appraisers. He also writes for the Haggerty Insider and for Octane. He's the publisher of the Haggerty Price Guide, which he founded in 2006 as Cars That Matter. He also serves on the board of the Rolls-Royce Foundation and the Macpherson College Advisory Board, and is an experienced concourse judge himself. And we all have to be very nice to him because Dave is the head judge of the Concours Virtual, so we have to be very polite. But gentlemen, you're very welcome.
Just make a donation to UNICEF, we'll be fine.
Oh, sorry, not to the usual place then we make the donation. To UNICEF this time. Well, thanks, guys. Now, we've got a couple of, we've got a number of interesting cars here. We've got, in the post-war Grand Tours, there were so many entrants that, as people know, we had to split it into two. So here we are now looking at post-war Grand Tours, but the younger cars. So this is the era from 1960 to 69. And again, as with the earlier cars, we've got a great selection. We must have, again, nearly 20 cars in this second class, ranging from the 1960 Alfa Romeo 2000 Praho Touring right up to a 68 Ferrari 275 GTB. And talking Ferraris, Peter, again, Ferraris feature strongly in this extraordinary lineup. Well, should we be surprised about that?
No, because after Ferrari branched into making expensive touring cars and large 12-cylinder touring cars that were sold to movie stars and shahs and kings and so on and so forth. That continued into the 1960s. And I think that the Ferrari 275 GTB is probably one of the most potent mixes between a sports car and a touring car that was ever made. The 250 GT Lusso is, I think, one of the prettiest sports cars ever to put on four wheels, and it has the most lovely dash. And the 250 GT California Spider, here is where I probably put my foot in it, because they only made, correct me here if I'm wrong, there was a short wheelbase and a long wheelbase and a covered headlight and a non-covered headlight, and they made about 36 of each. And the frequency with which you see them at Concours and at auctions, makes you think they made about 750 of each, but they didn't, of course.
But different vents on the side, so there's huge
Yeah,
difference, Peter.
I think there
Huge
was a
difference.
point at the height of the market where the price difference between a covered and an uncovered headlight was like $2 million. So people were paying $1 million for a headlight. Um, but my point is this, one gets calluses, and that's sad because we have to remember that the Ferrari 250 GT California Spider is probably the most beautiful convertible ever made. It's just absolutely fantastic from every angle, every proportion. It's simply just perfect. And so I think that of course is a grand touring car par excellence.
Well,
The 4400 Super America
yeah,
Aerodynamica, that's also a fantastic touring car, and of course with a very interesting bodywork, which I think divides people. I think some people like it, some people are not so partial to it, but it's certainly a memorable car, and you don't forget them.
for sure. Now, Dave, I mean, this is the 60s, let's not forget. So, design in the world took a different direction in the 60s. So, these Grand Tourers are of the swinging 60s. Do they live up to that era in your view?
I think so. You can't talk about the swinging 60s without the E-Type. It basically, started everything for a number of different automobile companies. Peter, you probably disagree with me, but I'm used to that. But it's a car that Enzo Ferrari said was the most beautiful car he'd ever seen. That's some pretty amazing praise. But getting to just the era itself, the swinging 60s, sure. And to me, maybe not the car that I'd want, but the Radford Shooting Brake Aston Martin, that pretty well puts a capstone on it. You could spend, and I believe the write up on this car said that the conversion alone cost the price of an average English house at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an era of great automotive design, but also great automotive excess, and a lot of fun came out of the cars in the 1960s. Keep in mind that in America, especially, this was the first of the eras of absolute disposable income. There's no Mustang in this class, but this was the Mustang exemplifies the car that the CEO and the person who answered the telephones at the corporation would each own their same version of the car. There was a lot going on in automotive styling and automotive design in the 1960s.
Well, to that point, Jamie, I mean, the whole entry list, I think, is either from Italy or the UK. I mean, are you surprised that there's no other countries represented there?
I'm not surprised, but I don't think it's necessarily right. I mean, it's if you told me that, for the rest of my life, I could only drive and own Italian and British sports cars from the and Grand Tours from the 1960s, I wouldn't be that sad. But I would say that, there's some omissions that I could think of. Certainly, as Dave was mentioning, American cars that were really great. And in the Grand Touring class, you really most American cars, by virtue of having big engines, were Grand Tours of a sort, that fit the bill otherwise. But, things like the Buick Riviera of 1963, were as beautiful as anything in the world. And, they're let down here and in collector circles by the fact that they were made by mass manufacturers, although, the numbers left are obviously greater than California Spiders, but they're not that great. So that's one omission. The other that comes to me off the top of my head is French cars. They're really great French ones. To quibble further, there were great other great launches that I think would fit the bill. The regular Pininfarina Flaminia coupe, I actually prefer to the Zagato as a car to drive, but it's got to be one of many people alive today favorite era. So it is exciting.
I mean, Peter, looking at some of the cars in the lineup, and this is almost across the whole concourse. Touring seem to feature in every class in the concourse virtual, with a coach build element. And would you consider them to be maybe the closest rival to Pininfarina in terms of achievement over such a long period of time, or would you say not?
I shall answer, but first I would like to sort of state that I do not disagree with Dave. I think that the Jaguar E-Type is an achingly beautiful car, the first series. Um, I think that I've said before that if they'd only made 10 or 25 of them, they would be just as expensive as a Cal Spider. But of course, they made a lot of them, but they are extremely beautiful. Touring is one of the all-time great coach builders. Until I think the last car they built was the Lamborghini Flying Star, based on a 350 GT. One of my absolutely favorite cars in the class is the 1960 Alfa Romeo Prajo, which I think is just an amazing piece of design. It's extremely elegant. The concave, or is it convex? I'm in doubt here. Rear window is fantastic, and it has absolutely one of the strangest dashboards I have ever seen. It's just a wonderful car, and everything in the interior just reeks of one-off and handmade, and it's just absolutely beautiful. The 1964 Abarth 2400 is also close to my heart. My daily driver is an Abarth. And so I'm partial to Abarths. Small, light, designed by Michelotti with coach built. The body is coach built. This particular car retains its original interior, which I think is lovely. And I just think that that's also a very beautiful, elegant, trim little car, and a great Grand Tourer.
I mean, Dave, to Peter's point, the numbers of cars produced makes a difference to the way you view it. It still could be a beautiful car, but if it's produced in thousands, then it will decrease its value or its rarities for sure. But and many of these cars, some are more valuable than others. But when it comes to the judging of them, what difference does it make to the judges' deliberations, or does value just indicate rarity and therefore importance?
Well, I like to say that if rarity was the biggest determining factor, Peter and I could make a car and we could call it the Dave and Peter Special and retire, because it would be worth obviously millions and millions of dollars because it's the only one in the world. Well, that's not the way it works, and that's a very good thing. And I hope that's not the way it works in much of the deliberation. Sure, there's points that come into bear when you're talking about which car is the most interesting to the judges. And it could be part of that backstory that we've talked about. It could be part of the presentation, the colors, the fact that the owner has taken it from a level 0 to a level 100. All those things should play in. But I would say that rarity is great in a consideration. It should never be the trump card. Neither should value, because it's not about that. It's really about what the judges, and then ultimately what the people choose is the car that they would like to see at the top of the list.
I agree with David. There's also the question of what you could call importance. If you want to make a top 10 list of the most important cars, you would have the Model T, you would have the Deux Chevaux, you would have the Citroën ID DS19, the Mini, and a number of other cars that were the cars that really changed the face of motoring. The Volkswagen Beetle, of course, and so on and so forth. By that yardstick, the E-Type is, of course, a far more important car than the Abarth. The E-Type was probably one of the grandest sports grand touring cars successes in the history of the automobile. So the E-Type is, of course, by that yardstick, a much more important car than the cars that are peripheral, and of which only very few were made.
Well, to that point, Jamie, I mean, one of the cars we have entered in this class is the E-Type that was on the Geneva show stand when the car was announced. So, you know, given its importance to automotive history, and given that that is the car that was on the shows, well, it was in the private reveal the night before, excuse me, and then it was on the show for the Geneva show stand for the reveal of the car. That's got to make that car, you know, increasingly attractive to owners and to judges.
Yeah, well, as an E-Type owner, I can confirm that in the general, you know, hagiography of the E-Type, and it is, you know, I mean, it is so important to Jaguar and to cars generally, and to so many people's love of cars, and certainly of my generation, that I don't think you can overstate its importance generally. As to that fact, I mean, that is, I mean, you work with what you got, but that was such a romantic story of how the Jaguar mechanics set out from the UK in that car and drove, you know, mythical speeds to make it to Geneva on time in inclement weather, you know, through snow and ice. And then it's all cleaned up and shown, and everybody's mind is blown. I mean, you know, that made Jaguar in a minute, that story, and of course it's, you know, their cross to bear. They'll never do that again. Nobody will ever do that again. And the story is so drilled into, you know, 50 years of people's thinking that I think it, whereas I probably would otherwise dismiss an E-Type out of hand as a Concours winner, that helps me get to the point where I kind of think, you know, this might not be the wrong choice, because it is so important. It is so beautiful. And I am moved by the story that Dave told about what Ferrari had to say about it.
Yeah.
You know, I think about it. I actually own one, Series 1.5, which is close enough to that original car. But although the market doesn't agree, I think that I often just think about them, and I'm often struck by the thought that if you talk about a Model T and an E-Type as both being like, you know, sort of epochal cars, you know, the E-Type is closer to the Model T in terms of when it was launched than it is to today, and yet it still seems like such a modern car.
Yeah, good point. I thought we might look at some of the entrants, guys. If you'll bear with me, I'm going to attempt a screen share again, if I can find it. Just bear with me. Peter, you mentioned this one, didn't you?
I just happen to like it. I think it's a lovely, lovely little thing. But I can't say it's important because it's a one-off prototype, and it was designed to be an Alfa Romeo luxury saloon, and it didn't make it into production, and it was the Pininfarina design that went into production. So by that token, it is not an important car. And I doubt that incredibly kooky dashboard would just not have made it into production.
I mean, it is kooky, as you say. It is pretty amazing. And the seat shape as well.
Yes.
Everything.
And I thought that those buttons on the top were for headrests, but they're also on the side. So that can't be it.
Well, no, when I glanced at it, I assumed that one was released to tip it forward. But yeah, you're right. I thought that was headrest, but maybe you didn't have, well, headrests
Not
were
1961.
Unnecessary at the time, weren't they?
But I just like the style of it. It is so incredibly Italian. It's kind of strange because I sort of see Gordon Keeble in it. But this is touring, and the Gordon Keeble was Bertone, right? With Giugiaro as designer. So.
It has. Did you say this was Michelotti though?
No. This is touring. I don't know who was chief designer with touring at the time.
Right.
Jamie, you were just talking about this and the epic job they had of getting the car to Geneva and getting it ready. So, as you said, Jamie, a big, you know, this transformed their fortunes overnight. This particular car, so that makes it an important car. But you know, there's a lot of interesting cars. I mean, we I wanted just to tell you just a quick story about this one, because you're not going to see this as your traditional Grand Tour, and it certainly doesn't fit the Larson description of what a Grand Tour would be. But then, would you normally see your? Does every limousine come with that sort of protection, do you think? The reason it has that is that this was the state limousine of Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan of Abu Dhabi, so the father of modern Abu Dhabi, and this was his state limousine. And there's a great story about how it's been found and really, it was found in Austria actually, and is being refurbished before going back to Abu Dhabi. So again, as we've said before about these cars, you know, Rolls-Royce Phantom 5 is never going to be at the top of anybody's list for a prize-winning Grand Tourer, but it's fun to hear of the background story to a car that's got a particular history. And this one,
in class with the Abarth,
yeah, this car has that history.
The Abarth, it should be in class with that.
Yeah, you're right. Here we go. Here's the Abarth, and this is lovely. It is. It's a beautiful, again, great backstory, but what a pretty car as well.
That's also Michelotti. I just think it's so trim and so elegant and with nothing superfluous, and it's just a lovely little coupe.
It is.
Indeed.
It is. Let's just look at the. Oh, hang on. This is the story behind. The story is well worth looking at, because this was obviously very dear to his heart. But again, you know, this is we talked
and that original interior, I just think is wonderful.
It's fantastic, and this was his everyday car for a period of time. So fascinating history. But as you say, you know, the lines on it are just fantastic. It's quite a.
It's just you know, it's knowing when to stop, and it's not embellished. It's just very clean.
Yeah.
I think they made about 20 of them.
Okay. Lovely story. Lovely story. So if we just go back again here, Dave, I think you mentioned, is this the one? Yeah, you mentioned this one, which
right.
Is a lot of fun. I think it's lovely. I think this is just so of the period.
I'm actually a sucker for anything that has the Radford label on it. You know, a specialist coach builder, if there ever was one. A lot of outdoors equipment and you know, comfort equipment added to a number of Radford cars. And you know, I mean, I understand why people would not like this or would not like this as a choice. But for me, it ticks a lot of the Grand Tour boxes, even though we agreed that you know, we didn't talk about an estate car, a station wagon being you know, in that class, but here we are, and I think it fits.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, if you want to cover long distance with a family, and as it shows further down, with your canine companion as well, and with room for your shooting equipment in the back, then you know, you can't go far wrong with this. But it's rare, it's special. I happen to know the owner of the car, and they're looking to maybe recreate a few more of these. But it's quirky, and it's a very British sort of Grand Tourer, I think. That this is the California Spider, which is an astonishing looking machine. Brave color scheme.
Yes, again, you know, maybe familiarity breeds contempt, but one needs to discard that and look at the beautiful brevity of the lines and the proportions. It is gorgeous.
It is. And you know, I can't imagine there's many bronze cars out there like this, but it suits it, and well lit and well photographed like that, it shows it off, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not red.
No, that makes it special. And then we had the 400 as well, which
right.
It is a good-looking car, Peter. You were talking about this.
Well, I think that it has very, shall we say, distinctive bodywork, and I think that it's a style that divides some people. I think some people like it, and some people, you know, are not so crazy about it. I personally think that it's got a lot more character than the super fast which was its, I think, successor.
Yeah.
And you can see a bit of the Superfast in the quarter in the B window and in the C pillar and rear flank. I think this is also a quintessential Grand Touring machine.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who owned a Super America stored it with me for quite some time, and one of the things I discovered about it was it had an option on it that was probably the best automotive option of the 60s that I can think of. There was a handle underneath the dashboard on there's a left-hand drive car on the right-hand side where you could pull the handle and the passenger side door would open. So instead of having to get out of your car when you're at the Casino Monte Carlo to pick up your girlfriend, you could just activate this manual handle, and the door would open depending on how much force you gave it, how strong the door would open. And I thought, yeah, that pretty well encompasses the good life right there. So does a picture of the car in front of Blenheim Palace, but it's a car made for the bon vivant, made for the good life.
For sure. Yes. I like it. Hong Kong taxis have the same facility, I think, but it's electric. Talking about accessories, Dave, did you read about this?
And of course, you can see the family resemblance to the Alfa Romeo 2000. It has the same concave rear window, and the side treatment is very like the Alfa Romeo. But of course, it's a shorter chassis, so the B window is rather smaller.
See if we've got a rear.
Stunning car, really stunning car.
It is. It is. But no, I was just remarking, you talking about the handle to open the door. This is a device that brings the spare wheel out through the side door. I'm not sure it would catch on.
They were expecting their Pirellis to go flat.
But
you could say that was an Oscar-winning performance, eh?
Yes.
Ah, very good. Oh, look at that unrehearsed wit.
And the right color for this car, as far as I'm concerned. Just beautiful. Just beautiful.
Yeah, I like this. Good backstory. This is a car that's really used. It's driven a lot, isn't it? Which is fantastic. I think there's a picture.
It's pictures of Rally Monte Carlo livery. Yeah, there you are.
Somebody arriving at Monte Carlo, having rallied from England. It's a British base. Been British based from new, I think. But there you go. It's a car that's enjoyed. It's a car that's used, and that's what we like. It's a properly lived in. Quite unusual. This was this was Fiat punching above its weight to a degree, Peter, wasn't it?
Yep, absolutely. There was a big 4-door Fiat sedan at the time that started with a 1.5 liter engine, and the top of the line sedan with or saloon with a lot of chrome had a 2.3 liter engine, and that's the engine that's in this car. Right. Tuned a bit, of course.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. Well, guys, I'm going to come back off the share just so we can see you all again, and just say thanks a lot again. I think that the judges are going to have a tough time. You judges are going to have a tough time with this. You've got some that definitely meet the Larson description of Grand Tourers and some perhaps less so, but you've got a great selection of cars, some extremely important historically, others just very interesting and lovely cars, and all of them something that we could jump in and drive and love every minute of it. So enjoy your judging. Thanks again, guys. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thank you.
Well done.